Welcome to the Startup of the Year podcast, where each episode we showcase exciting new companies from around the world. This podcast is produced by Established, creators of the Startup of the Year program. Established is focused on helping organizations with their innovation, startup, and communication strategies.
Hello and welcome back to the Start to Your Podcast. I'm Frank Gruber, your host. I'm also the co-CEO of Established, as well as the managing partner of Established Ventures. I'm excited today because I've got a special guest. We're going to have us joining us here in a second. It's somebody I've known for a long time, from back when I lived in Illinois, Chicagoland area, and then eventually we reconnected when we were in Vegas. And she's just been doing a lot on the interwebs for a long time, in social media and marketing and PR. And today we're going to have Sarah Evans join us. She's the partner and head of PR at Zen Media. She's a professional moderator. She's done tons of interviews with different folks from the tech space to celebrities to you name it. And obviously just really smart about how to get your story out there and how to do what she does so well. So she's going to share that with you here in a second. But before we do, I wanted to mention that she was part of an established network monthly innovation circle, which we hosted a little while back. And we start kicking these off in March, and they're the third Thursday of every month. So if you're interested, do sign up. You can join, every third Thursday, and there's always another train coming. So if you miss it, don't worry. Just go to est.us/the mic 2025 to sign up. Again, the website is est.us/the mic. And then it's 2025 is the year. So go to that on the interwebs, sign up. Love to have you join us and take part in some of these conversations real time. All right. And for those not familiar with the mic, it's part of the Established Network. It's a new endeavor we started a little bit ago. And we're trying to really aggregate all the thousands of entrepreneurs that have been through our network over the course of the last decade plus, which includes entrepreneurs, investors, thought leaders, authors, corporate innovators, some of the folks from the government agency side as well. And we're trying to really get everyone together and collaborate together in one place and, obviously help each other get further. So that's what it's all really about. So if you want to learn more, just simply go to established.network and you can sign up and join the network. All right, now let's get started with that conversation with Sarah Evans. All right, so Sarah, it's been a while. How are you doing today?
Good. I mean, the folks watching probably don't know that we go way back since we were
Right, we do. Like 20 something years. So it's been good. So yeah, I'm glad that we're here together again, talking about, kind of storytelling and how to get your story out there. So for those that are not familiar though, maybe share a little bit more about your origin story, how you got to where you are as far as PR and storytelling, and that way it'll kind of set the base of for everyone that's kind of listening and watching.
I love that. I always joke that I was hosting tea parties at 2 years old and realized I love bringing people together and love hearing people's stories. And that is inherently what PR does. I typically say professionally, marketing is what gets people in the door. PR is what keeps people coming back because they connect to those stories. I started my early career in healthcare, higher education, agency work, and then launched my own company that I had for 15 and a half years. It was recently acquired, so I can empathize with anyone going through any sort of M&A. Or just startup mentality. Zen Media, I've partnered with for the past almost 10 years. The CEO, Shama Hyder, is a dear friend. It's fabulous. Live in Las Vegas with my husband and children, and typically work with larger companies, but my roots are in startup, and it's something I'm very passionate about and dedicate a lot of complimentary office hours to. And in fact, I'm a mentor for the startup Vegas community as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, you've kind of done it all as far as every type of different kind of company to represent and tell their stories. All right, so tell me a little bit more. You describe yourself as a digital strategist and storyteller. What does that now mean in 2025, and as that's evolved over the last 20 something years?
Well, the funny thing is, over the past several months, it's complete. I feel like I started with fax machines, and now I'm talking about generative AI search and how that is impacted by what we're doing in PR. I think it was just this week I wrote a post on LinkedIn about how not to listen to anyone if they say the press release is dead. We did a search of every single client in ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, Google AI search, who is company name, and at least one press release was referenced by the company in that result. So it's flipping everything that we even knew. Of course, media relations still remains. It is vitally important to have journalists telling stories, but there's so many other ways that we can impact that are simply outside of what we ever thought was possible.
That's really interesting. So all the different, AI tools are using PR or press releases as kind of bases for additional information to share, is what you're saying.
Yeah, owned content on your website, social with LinkedIn being the top priority, press releases followed by trade media, general media, and even some of your competitors' information.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So Rob kind of set the base for, creating your story and getting it out there, creating your story. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but also a little bit how do you get it out there. So, what's the first thing someone should do when they're trying to figure out their, brand story around, and you can talk about a bigger company. You obviously work with large companies as well.
I mean, your origin story is number one. I always like to start there and figure out what was the purpose. Secondarily, for your customers, what is their pain point? That's the second thing we always hit, because you can talk about yourself all day long, but if your customer can't see where you relate to them or what purpose you solve, what solution you bring to their pain points, it's really tough to resonate. Then that's one audience. Secondarily, it's how are you presenting your story to the media and different modes of media, right? Trade journalists are covering different things than each mainstream member of the media that has a different beat or a different vertical, a different niche. It might be, we had a call with a very prominent news network this week with a great story, and she was broadcast. She said, okay, hit me with the visual pitch. And then she goes, how does this relate to Trump? Because that's what we're covering right now. And we had to like literally pivot quickly. All of the best laid groundwork helped us be able to communicate that, but we weren't planning that inherently, when we went through messaging.
So you have to be ready, flexible, because you're trying to meet them where they are and where they want to tell the story, right? And versus just, saying this is my story, go tell it, right? So that's what you're kind of doing, fielding on the fly.
I would say most brands, startups in particular, are so excited by what they're doing, they can't understand why don't media want to write about this? It's because they're usually approaching it as the brand, as the product, without any numbers, any due diligence on what the reporters write about, or they're missing complete industry trends. It is really hard to get coverage as a startup. There are ways around it because you have to set precedents and have, start that flywheel in motion, but you typically can't go straight to, New York Times, TechCrunch of the world for that type of coverage.
Unless you're Theranos is
Listen,
that just happened last week.
playbook is be famous or already have a lot of money and success.
Right, exactly. All right, so let's talk about those frameworks. So some other frameworks aside being famous and having past successes. So what are some of those frameworks or mental models that you'd use to kind of shape the story and for those that are kind of trying to create this and replicate it over and over again?
So let's talk about it from a startup perspective specifically, because it does change. They're different based on what stage of company you are. And deciding upfront, and listen, the caveat is you can change this 100 times. You can A/B test, especially with messaging. You might go through 100 iterations before you find what hits or sticks. But first, it's usually a founder-led brand, because maybe you can't talk about what you're building and what you're doing, but you do have a voice and a vantage point. So perhaps you're hitting up podcasts first to start to lay that groundwork. Maybe you're using LinkedIn Live or your own network to start seeding that content, but essentially building a footprint on the topics that you want to speak about. And then when you're going through messaging and looking for those media moments, the catalyst is usually either a funding round, a major board announcement, or some really high impact number. Maybe it's, we have 100 million revenue. We just got 1 million customers, whatever that is, but you have an impactful moment that starts the flywheel turning. So build the footprint, find the impactful moment, move on from there.
Right. I also like the one that some folks do is like create their own kind of research or findings or some kind of analysis that's different than anything out there, and then relate it to the world. So to your example a moment ago, like whatever that thing is, whether right now it's Trump or whatever, how do you create something that relates to what they're trying to do? Whether it be a research paper or findings or survey or something like that.
And I would say, again, my caveat, having done this for 21 years, I'd say 80% of the research and reports people bring to us are not newsworthy. They are white papers based off closed data with their own customer group, which media are most likely not going to cover.
Right. So how do you change that? What's the best approach there for those?
Well, there's a very specific formula for that. Typically, let's call it, 2,000 independent responses. It's built off something that's general. So these aren't people with an agenda beholden to your company. It's something that's very unique and practical. They're quite expensive to actually execute on a scale that large, mainstream media want to cover. I just say it's the opposite of we polled our 200 customers and this is what we found.
Right. Yeah, that's not going to work. Okay. So obviously some frameworks that they could go through to kind of make that more interesting, I guess you could say, to the media.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you've helped brands navigate, relations, public relations, in this fast-paced world. So what are some of the mistakes that you see people doing as they try to get press? And you mentioned some from Startup Land, but I mean, obviously you mentioned some others as well. Got them.
For everyone listening, I do not want to be a Debbie Downer. For every negative thing I share, I could probably share 10 positives, but I will just tell you because most everyone learns everything from mistakes. So we'll just use it that these were learning moments.
Yeah.
What people are doing wrong. Number one is pigeonholing where they want to be. They'll say, I only want Wall Street Journal for this launch announcement, right?
Mhm.
And we'll pitch them and we'll get a decline. Well, there's something I call power. I guess it's power mode content. You need a lead media to announce something. And that secondary outlet, if it's tier one, if it's still credible, let's say you get Fortune instead, or a TechCrunch or Axios, one of those big players, it doesn't diminish the power of what you're doing because Wall Street Journal may come back and say, oh my gosh, you got all of this traction. Now we want to cover you. This happened with a client recently where they didn't get their dream outlet on day one, but then it went live. This Week in Startups got them as the lead on the show that day. Then we had this residual coverage, and lo and behold, within 2 days, Wall Street Journal's covering them. So it was a pathway, but it was a disappointment or a failure, even though they got great coverage. And it's hard when you're a founder and you're so passionate to feel let down of things. So I'd say that's one. Number two, believing that what you believe to be newsworthy is newsworthy. Most of the time it's not. And you should talk to a professional who can help guide that narrative. If you don't have a complete story arc, if you can't link it to something that's happening right now, that's modern. If it's you're trying to pitch someone who just doesn't cover things in that way, it matters. I could probably list 10 more, but those are the two biggest, Frank.
Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit more about, social. You've been huge on social media from the beginning, right? And it's changed quite a bit. There's so many platforms, some have come and gone, some rise back up. Let's talk about with brands, especially, and there's constantly a conversation that's just like every, so often, every minute there's probably something new to talk about. So how do you tell brands or how do you work with brands to kind of decide where to show up and where to kind of stay quiet and what's relevant and what shouldn't be? And, because it's endless. I mean, you could spend your entire life like responding to things basically.
I mean, here's to begin with, know all the rules and then break them because everything that I say today could change tomorrow. We do have a full social team at Zen, so I'm going to share with you what I know enough to be dangerous because the world has completely changed from when I came into it. We also deal primarily with B2B, so take that to heart. LinkedIn is usually 99% of the time where we're guiding our clients, minus our B2B plus B2C clients, where we're also hitting, TikTok, Instagram, those sorts of things. I want to focus on LinkedIn specifically right now, especially for startups and founders who likely need to build personal brand and tell that story. LinkedIn just released its annual algorithm report, and employee-led discussions on LinkedIn are outperforming any brand content. Brand-led content's only getting 1 to 2% visibility on desktop. Employer-led is like 35% plus and even higher on mobile. So that tells startup community and your startup team, you want to empower and arm those voices to tell your stories more so than your brand-led messaging because it's simply not going to hit.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So people matter, people are voices, and obviously follow that lead. Let's talk about LinkedIn. It's definitely changed over the last several years, and now it's become such a powerhouse for getting your voice out there. Is that where you're seeing too, or are there other places that you're spending time?
I am mostly LinkedIn. Our entire leadership team is LinkedIn. And we're also seeing that in going back to that crazy generative search, if you ask ChatGPT what social media content it ranks the highest, it's publicly available content on LinkedIn.
Wow.
We're doing regular searches, and we have a tool that we use where we can cross-analyze any brand across every single generative search. LinkedIn content is coming in as sources or areas of approval from team members, competitors, media.
Wow. It started as a resume.
Right?
Yeah.
Years.
Yep. That's crazy. All right. So definitely, so LinkedIn, how do you feel about some of the other platforms you've used? So like obviously X was one that was big for a long time, and is that worth your while still, or has it become too?
So sad because I would not have the career I had today without the original Twitter. That is really where everything started. Launched the first industry live hashtag. That's how everything really started for my career, and I was able to actually launch a business out of that. I actually posted on X today for the first time, and I don't know how long.
Mhm.
It is totally different. It's the platform where I have the most amount of followers, and yet I simply don't use it. And a lot of the brands we work with are very intentional based on either their political affiliation or maybe certain vantage points will be very implicit. We are using X or we are not. And
Mm.
and so we have to work through that on a case by case basis, just based on the current landscape.
Okay. What about like Threads and Blue Sky and some of these other platforms that have kind of taken up?
So personally, we've kind of treated those as like a drop in the bucket. I don't know yet. We do engage with a lot of media
Mhm.
there because media also have accounts, they're journalists and news outlets, and they'll be sharing things. Unless we can show a correlation to our brand, we do not just recommend being a voice on every platform unless you're a huge mainstream name brand where you have to have um, participation there. But most of our B2B brands are not there.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Let's talk about newsworthiness. And you mentioned a little bit at the beginning there about, they're not going to care about everything you do, right? So how do you become newsworthy? What are some of the things you can do to create that? Like what are the, even if you don't have a big budget or a flashy, necessarily launch, how do you create these moments? We talked about a little bit at the beginning, but I want to dive into that a little bit more.
I like to break things down very intentionally into reactive and proactive months because they have completely different strategies. A proactive means you do have a piece of major announcement, and that's where you're going to get likely additional coverage if it's packaged and pitched correctly. Plus, you're likely sending out a wire release, which is going to enhance, SEO and syndication and amplification. That's a standalone. I think what we're really focused on right now is the reactive month. We don't have anything. So what do we do?
Mhm.
Typically go into thought leadership mode, especially for startups or B2B. What can
Mhm.
a leader talk about in trade publications that is new, interesting, or similar? And again, I'm a broken record with generative search right now because it's like we have this, it's not closed off yet. We can feed the beast with all of this content. So if you don't have something newsworthy, look at a content editorial calendar that has owned, social, and thought leadership. And if you have a
Mhm.
little bit of budget, a wire release. And that quadrant, that four-part um, scenario should generate some amplification for you that you
Right.
share. So find your best trade pub, pitch a byline, and then have supplementary content that aligns with that.
That's really interesting. I mean, AI hasn't been around, or generative AI hasn't been around that long, and it's already changing the game as far as how you approach this. Can you talk? I mean, so you mentioned it a little bit at the beginning. You went real quick through it. So can you talk again? So the most important things for a founder or a company to look at if they want to get into generative AI is like LinkedIn. You said is important. What other things are important? Press releases.
Yes, I mean, LinkedIn, I actually have a whole, if you're watching this, this is your call to action, DM me on LinkedIn and I will run a quick search for you
Mhm.
for free of what your persona, your company's URL shows up like right now. I can give you a quick snapshot
Great.
tool.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. All right. So we talked about some of those trends. I guess like we talked a little bit about how endless it can be. Um, you know, s- People are getting found in certain areas on on Instagram or on TikTok, right? Brands are still being found there. How much time do you need to devote to those places doing stories, which is very time consuming? Like, is that a good strategy, or is it better to just like focus on like written content on LinkedIn and some of these other things?
It depends on your bandwidth. I'd say most of the startups I talk to, it's overwhelming when you actually hear how much content you need to have. And so it prevents them from ever getting started. And our CEO, Shama Hyder, always says you have to be okay with the cringe content, meaning like you have to start somewhere, right? Because you have to create this whole repository of content. If you're looking at TikTok, that's still the fastest way to make a blip without having a lot of followers because you can go viral on there very quickly. But then to maintain that means you have to be creating every day. On LinkedIn, if you really want to resonate, it might mean 3 to 4 times a day. But if you create this repository of content, let's say it's YouTube, right? And you commit to posting a video every day for 100 days. At some point, you're going to have 0 viewers. You might have 10. You might end up with 50 subscribers. And then you're going to hit a tipping point. At some point, it's just going to happen, right? Once you hit that tipping point, you can go back and take all that old content and reemerge it and then cross-share it on different platforms. But it's just committing to creating that repository.
Got it. That's great. Great advice. All right. Let's see here. So most companies like have, it's one person or two people when they first get started, limited resources. What are your favorite tools for kind of monitoring your reach, just how well you're doing as far as storytelling goes?
So I'll be very honest, those tools are expensive. That is one of the benefits of working with an agency. We always joke and say, well, you also, I mean, I shouldn't joke, but you get access to, a $500,000 tech stack to monitor these things. For free, you can do things like just set up TalkWalker alerts or Google alerts. I say those are probably the 2 fastest things for yourself, your executives, your competitors, and any important industry terms that you want to monitor, or maybe it's events. That's a free way. You can just take it and do it. Outside of that, when you want to get more complex, you could have Perplexity doing some research for you. In generative search, you have to obviously pay for it. But if you have anything in your suite, I would say ChatGPT and Perplexity are important. You could even pull, there's got to be a way, right? You could create a custom research project based on all of the other research that exists in a certain area, simply by using that and packaging it together. I'm sure there's a million different ways that I haven't even thought of that you could use those to work for your benefit.
Great. All right, we're gonna put the old fortune teller hat on here, futuristic hat. 3 to 5 years, where do you see this going as far as the changes you've seen over the last 20? What you could kind of forecast it out with generative AI and all the things kind of happening.
I'm the worst at futurists, Frank. I am such an happening. Let's pivot and go. But I mean, we are thinking that far ahead. And from a PR perspective, I'm assuming a lot of these tools will start to get closed off. There will be some pay to play mentality. So we're trying to take advantage of it while we can. Secondarily, I think there's going to be power in brands who can find out how many times they're getting referenced by AI search. There's no tool that exists for that yet, but much like Moz or something similar, where you're like, our brand was referenced in 58 searches, generative searches today. And when you look at those searches, you say, wow, we totally misidentified what our ICP needs, and we can pivot and change based on that. And I think that also PR and storytelling is going to integrate into the marketing mix in a totally different way, because we'll be able to have some hard data and numbers in what we're doing.
Great. We got a little bit of time left, a couple minutes. If there's any questions in the audience, please drop them in the chat. We'd love to get that question answered for you if you're here. For all those founders listening, what's one thing that they could do tomorrow to improve how they're telling their story?
Number one, do a LinkedIn audit of your profile and your employees' profiles. Or do you have everything in there that can help people find you if you need that? And don't scoop yourselves. I feel like that's something every time someone comes to us, especially a startup who wants advice, they're like, we're about to announce a new hire. And I'll say, wait, did this person already post it on LinkedIn? Yes. Oh, like remove it, delete it, delete. Don't scoop yourself. If you have some great stories coming up, don't post it prematurely. I know we came from a time of building in public and sharing things. If you commit to that, that's fine. But you also have to acknowledge that it perhaps could kill an upcoming trade story.
One more question for you, and then we got to wrap here. If you are somebody that's out there, but you don't, got your own startup, but you don't want to get on social, it's not your thing. Like you like privacy, you're more of an internal kind of person, or maybe you're concerned about having all your profiles out there. What should you do? How should you handle PR?
Create a persona. Create a persona.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be your brand, but maybe it's someone you commit to, like Slope from Progressive. Create that character and own that it's a character, and let people engage with it, like Duolingo or someone. Like create that, and people feel empowered, like they're playing a character, a voice. You can hire a social media manager to take that for you. but it's something else that isn't just brand driven, but you can feel like you have an outlet to still connect with people.
All right, one more question then related to that. You do that, and then someone you're trying to raise funding out there, and people Google you and they don't find you, and they're like, who am I investing in? They're not out there. Is that weird? It feels like weird. Maybe they're not,
It's weird. I've never heard, I mean, founders, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? You've got to accept that there are some hard things that you have to do. And I work with founders that are very technical and they don't like that, but we just build their platform out and somebody else runs it for them. But then the persona is the engaging thing. I do not mean that persona is going to be the person that interacts with media or should be like the voice or face public, publicly if you're having a media interview, but it's something to engage with people that might be new, exciting, or different, or maybe it's an AI designated person that people have fun with. And again, it's owned, it's disclaimed that that's what it is.
Okay, that's great. Great advice. Really appreciate your time. All right, thank you so much, Sarah. That was fantastic. It was great catching up, and I'm sure people are going to take a lot of what you said and to heart and use some of those tips and tricks right away to get their story out there and get their storytelling done in a better way. So great perspectives about brands and growth and how to do this. So really appreciate you being here and sharing that. And hopefully, like I said, some folks can learn from your wisdom over the years. You've been doing this for a long time. All right. So thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for being here. And remember, today is the best day to start up, not tomorrow, not the next day. Get it going, get it started. And hopefully we can help you along the way. If you join our community, you have access to resources and support and kind of everything that we're trying to build around here to kind of move you forward in the startup space. So until next time, I'm Frank Gruber signing off.
Thanks for listening to the Startup of the Year podcast. Be sure to subscribe and we'll be back with another episode soon.